Good evening. My name is Paul Amos, and I'm the founder of The Redeemed. The Redeemed is a community of men who've come together of all backgrounds to discuss the difficulties that they face in life, as well as the triumphs over those difficulties. Today, we're very blessed to have the opportunity to have a special speaker here at our Pursuing Restoration format, Patrick Tyndall, who is here and the founder of Ironman Outdoors. Please welcome Patrick.
Hey, Paul, it's an honor and a blessing to be here with you, brother.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. We appreciate you taking time away from your very busy schedule and being willing to come here, especially as you go into the busiest time of year. And I know we'll get into that in just a few minutes. But Patrick, if I could start today by asking you just a question that we ask all of our viewers, all the people that come on the show. What does redemption mean to you?
Yeah, I think of the old hymn, redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. And I think I'm a sinner. I'm like Paul, at times I'm chief among sinners. And I can't redeem myself, but Christ has redeemed me through his grace and his mercy and what Jesus Christ did for us on the cross. And for that, I'm redeemed.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing that. Maybe if we could persuade you, Patrick, to maybe tell us a little bit about your story and a little bit about what brought you to the place to even begin a new ministry like Ironman Outdoors.
Yeah, so I'm an average guy, okay, just like all the average guys that are watching this webinar podcast. I mean, there ain't nothing special about Patrick, okay? In 2002, I was teaching a Sunday school class at a Baptist church in Columbia, South Carolina, and we had this little problem. We had a lot of women in our class, but we didn't have a whole lot of men. And the men that were there were kind of asleep. And I thought, well, maybe it's my Sunday school teaching. Maybe I'm the reason that they don't want to come. And I began to read some books and do some research. And I began to find out that, there's a problem in our churches today, and it's the lack of men. And some statistics will show you that it's like 69% female. If you just look at the adults, if you take kids out of the mix, the average church in America is about 69% female, which tells me we got a huge gap and we've got to do some work to reach our men. So me and a small group of guys in my Sunday school class, we began to kind of come up with a strategy. How can we reach so-and-so's husband? How can we reach that guy? And I would ask her, I would say, well, where's your husband at? And she'd say, oh, well, it's the rut and he loves to hunt. So, and then it comes springtime. Well, it's turkey season and he really, he's got to get his gobblers or the bass are spawning and he's fishing today. So we kind of had this moment of divine inspiration. And I truly, truly believe it was divine inspiration. We said, okay, let's have a weekend that we plan for men, and let's do it not at the church, not in the Sunday school class. Let's do it at the lake. And so we went to Santee Cooper, which is a famous there's two big lakes here in South Carolina that make up the Santee Cooper system. They're world famous. We had several guys in our class that owned boats. I think South Carolina is like number 2 in the country of boat ownership per capita, right behind Florida. Yeah, so there's a lot of people with boats here. And I had one guy who loves to cook, and I said, man, you bring your grill, and I want you to cook. And we had about 12 guys that first weekend, and after dinner, I wanted us to do something more spiritual than just saying the blessing. I didn't want to do a worship service. I didn't want anybody to have to sing, but I wanted us to have a manhood discussion. And I wanted to really talk about what it means to be a godly husband. What does that look like? How am I supposed to treat my wife? And so many of our guys grew up in homes that were broken, so they don't have a good picture of what a godly marriage looks like. And so they need to rub shoulders with other men. As iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another. I think that means you got to rub up against some other guys because all of a man's ways seem innocent to him, it tells us in the Bible. And so Patrick can justify, well, as long as we're not fighting and arguing, I guess we've got a great marriage. Well, not necessarily. And how do I become a godly father? What does that look like? What am I supposed to do? I mean, I take my kids to church, but what? Am I supposed to be leading a family Bible study? I mean, what does all that look like? And so we unpacked that on the weekend, and guys began to open up, and they began to really share things that they would have never talked about at the church or in the Sunday school classroom. And we began to find out that atmosphere is key, Paul, to getting men to open up. And so that lake house was the right atmosphere. A hunting cabin is the right atmosphere. When you go to Myrtle Beach, or when you go to these other stores, that you get out of the truck and you follow turkey tracks that are written on the pavements to follow to the store. And then the store looks like this giant log cabin. And you walk in that big log cabin, and over on this side, there's thousands of rod tips, fishing rods over here. On this wall over here, there's hundreds of gun barrels. And you as a man say, I am home. I can spend 2 hours in Bass Pro Shop and not get tired. But you take me to Kohl's or to Old Navy or some of these stores with my wife, and I mean 10 minutes and my feet are starting to hurt. I'm looking for a place to sit down. Bass Pro Shop sells atmosphere just as much as they sell product. And we, in my Sunday school class, we discovered that we need to put men in the right atmosphere to talk to them about Christ. And so that's where the retreat idea came from. 2007, a guy came on the retreat and looked at me and said, Patrick, this could be bigger than just your Sunday school class. And I pulled together the group of guys from my class, and we formed a board of directors. We established a 501c3. None of us had a clue what in the world we were doing, but we were being obedient to what God was calling us to do. And the retreats just got more, and they got more adventurous and further out geographically. And now fast forward, I guess 14 years later, God's just blessed it. And this is, through the generous support of some donors, this is what I do full time. And I'm just thankful that God lets me be a part of it.
Well, that is exciting. What a wonderful adventure. And I agree with you. Atmosphere is something that is sold in so many different places. You mentioned a statistic that I had not heard before, with 69% of people in church being women. I'm curious whether you think, and not to knock the traditional church, but just to think about what atmosphere is being built within the church to draw 69% women and only 31% men.
Yeah, I think you're starting to see a lot of the newer multi-site campuses, the larger churches. You're starting to see them become very intentional about their architecture and the type of building materials that they're using inside their worship centers. You're starting to see more corrugated steel or tin and that type of thing used as trim, even in the men's restroom. You're starting to see deer heads hanging in church in the men's restrooms. I think these are churches that are very intentionally designing it that way so that men feel comfortable there. And I think they're having a lot of success, and we need more of that.
So how do we obviously there's a step in integration there that you're able to bring together with new forms of architecture. But how do we bring it together, men and women, in an atmosphere that is not just inviting for both of them, but is inviting for them collectively?
Well, if you get the man, you're going to get the women. You're going to get the family. I mean, we've all heard the statistic. If you reach a man for Christ, it's like 90% of the time the whole family comes to know the Lord. And so I think if we're intentional about reaching men, I think the wives are going to respond to that because they want their husband there. They want him plugged into a men's Bible study. They want him to be connected. A lot of wives, have been waiting for men to step up and lead in the home. And so I think if we are intentional about reaching men, it's going to benefit the whole family. And I don't think you're going to have a problem getting the ladies and the children there as well, because when dad's there, they want to be there also.
Well, knowing how important leadership is from a male perspective, tell me a little bit about what type of men show up to your retreats and what type of mindset they're in from a leadership perspective when they arrive.
Well, I can tell you some of them can't shoot a rifle very good because we have a lot of big bucks that are missed, but I won't go there. I'm just kind of joking, but the typical guy who comes on one of our retreats, we've had guys, as young as 21, 22, all the way up to early 70s. But by and large, it's guys in their 30s, 40s, 50s who have a little bit of disposable income to be able to afford to go on an out-of-state hunt. Our hunts are very affordable. We're not outfitters. We don't have a whole lot of overhead. We're just looking to pay for the cost of the leases and the food plots that we put in and the Millennium tree stands that you sit in. So our hunts are very affordable, but these guys, just like all of us, they wear really good camo. Okay. And I'm not talking about Sitka. They wear really good camo over areas of their life. And when I say that, here's what I mean. I know how to act in front of my mother-in-law, and so do you. And I know how to act in front of the boss at the staff meeting on Mondays. And I know how to act in front of the guys at the hunting club on Saturday. And I know how to act in front of the pastor at church on Sunday. And what I'm really doing is I'm putting on different patterns of camo to blend into my surroundings. And when we see guys that show up on our retreats, I mean, sometimes they look like they just stepped off the page of Cabela's catalog. I mean, they've got the finest camouflage. They're wearing the Sitka. They got the $2,500, custom rifle, or if it's a hog hunt, they got an AR with thermal and all this stuff on. I mean, they've spent a lot of money. They're driving an F-250, $70,000 King Ranch. But on the inside, even though they're wearing good camo, on the inside, they're just like all of us. They're struggling. They may have a marriage that's struggling. They may have just gone through a divorce. They may have just lost their job that was, a man's career is such a big part of his identity. And they may be going through some sort of career crisis. They've got kids that did not turn out the way that they had hoped, or maybe some kids that have made some bad decisions. And we're just broken. All of us as men are a fragile, fragile bunch, and we need God's grace. We need to rub shoulders with other men. We need accountability. And I think these guys, it's no coincidence. It's no accident that they came on these retreats, because usually they've come that weekend to hear a word, not from Patrick or Ironman Outdoors. They've come to hear a word from the Lord. And maybe there's a manhood discussion that we have on marriage. I've actually had a guy text me one time. He came on a retreat, and him and his wife were having struggles. And he told me after the fact, he told me that he wasn't planning on going home to his wife. He had planned after the hunt, he was going to his brother's house. And he texted me on Monday, and he said, I just want you to know, because of that discussion we had on marriage, he said, I went home after this weekend, and me and my wife started a conversation, and we're working through some of our issues. And so, you know what? He needed to be there that weekend, and it might have just saved his marriage.
That is truly exciting. What an impact you're obviously having. When I think about the atmosphere that you're creating at these weekends, most of these guys show up and they probably don't know that they have camouflage on. When I think about my personal history and my story, one of my spiritual mentors used a different term other than camouflage. He talked about the Paul suit, the facade that I was putting on the outside, and that I had to learn to step out of that Paul suit and continue, to be real and to be open and to be the real me, as opposed to putting on a show for everybody else out there. And I was expending so much energy putting on that show that I never really developed the character and the interpersonal things that I needed to be the spiritual man I should have been, the father, the husband. That would lead to that. And so I can imagine that you get a lot of people who come in that have never really heard this concept. And so how do you begin to break them down and talk about what their camouflage is and what they can do to take it off?
So the whole weekend is, I like to call it a weekend long manhood discussion. So we build up to that. We don't start by, saying, take the camo off and tell me all your deepest, darkest sins and what you really struggle with. We start by answering, we have our pro staffers or volunteers, and we have key questions that we throw out. And one of those key questions is, tell me about your father. Tell me something that you learned from your dad that was really good. And tell me something you learned from your dad that wasn't so good. And we'll go around the room that first night, and everybody can pretty much answer that question. Even if they didn't have a dad, maybe they had a grandfather or an uncle who was sort of their dad. And they answer that question. And then the next night, we're going a little bit deeper. And I throw out a key question like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your marriage? And most guys will, I can almost predict, they'll say, 7, 8, And then I'll say, well, what if I asked your wife, what would she rate your marriage? What if I asked your kids, what when they see mom and dad, what do they think mom and dad's marriage is? And then it gets very real, very quick. And some guys actually text their wives and say, hey, how would you rate our marriage? And And typically the number's a couple of points lower than what he thought. And so that causes a lot of, good conversation that needs to take place in a marriage. But then the last night is when we really open up, and to get other guys to take off their camo, I have to be willing to take off my camo. And our Ironman pro staffers, they need to be willing to take off their camo. So you got to be willing to tell your story. And it's not a story of your success. It's a story of your failure. And, God uses our brokenness. He uses our weaknesses. He is made strong. And so we got to be willing to show areas of our lives where we struggle and where we're weak. And then that spins into a conversation where a man feels very comfortable opening up in that atmosphere. Again, this ain't Sunday morning at the worship service. This is a Saturday night in a hunting cabin sometimes with a group of 8 or 9, 10, 12 strangers that you didn't know before the weekend began. And that's where a guy can really open up and share some things about where he wears camo.
So you're getting down and dirty with your story. You're telling them about all of the things that have happened to you. And how do you see transformation happen in the room as y'all begin to share your most intimate details?
So the devil wants you to think that you're the only one who struggles with that. He wants you to believe that your marriage he wants you to think your marriage, number one, is bulletproof, and that an affair could never happen to you. A divorce could never happen to you. He wants you to think that. But when it comes to your struggles, your sins, and look, let's just name them, okay? For guys, I've done hundreds of retreats, and I'm telling you, here's the main sins that guys struggle with: lust, pride, alcohol, anger, tongue, maybe gambling. It's just a handful of things that really trip up men in their lives. And what we like to say is we all struggle with the same things and pretend that we don't. But when we open up and start sharing with those guys what we struggle with, you know what? They say, I'm not alone. Gosh, you struggle with that too? And this guy, he's a deacon in your church. He's a pastor. I mean, he struggles with that too. And then this very, liberating is not the right word, but it opens up, and the things that you keep in secret actually have more power over you. But sunshine's the best disinfectant. So when we get it out in the open and say, hey guys, let me tell you, this is something I'm not proud of, but here's where I struggle, and here's where I've blown it in the past. But here is how Jesus Christ not only died to forgive me of that sin, he died to give me victory over that sin. And you do not have to be a slave to that sin in Christ.
Wow. Well, that is powerful from a transformation perspective. So you get these guys on these weekends, and obviously it's a single weekend and a single event. And, I can think about things like sales conferences that I used to attend, where you can really get people pumped up and you can get them the rah-rah, but the sustainability of it sometimes is difficult. Maybe you can talk for a few minutes about what you do to help these men after they come out of an important and life-changing event like this, and what can they do to continue and create continuity? Who are you sending them toward, and what type of leadership do you help provide for them as an ongoing part of their new life?
Yeah, excellent question. So I have a thumb drive that I keep with my computer, and on that thumb drive are pictures of guys that have been baptized. And the first guy that ever did it, I still have that picture. He sent me this picture. This was a year after we did a saltwater fishing retreat off Morehead City, North Carolina. We caught some nice fish that weekend. It was a little bit rough. We didn't go out as far as we wanted to go out to try to get dolphin and tuna and stuff like that, but we did catch some fish. Nothing super spiritual seemed to have happened that weekend. And I kind of went away thinking, maybe next time we'll have something more spiritual happen. Well, about a year after that retreat, I get an email out of the blue from one of the guys who had been on that retreat that weekend. And it's a picture. It's a picture of him being baptized in his Ironman Outdoors t-shirt. And this was just very fascinating to me. I mean, this was just really cool, And I said, his name is Brian. I said, Brian, why'd you get baptized in your Ironman Outdoors t-shirt? He said, because I've been on a journey seeking the Lord for the past year. And he said, it all started that weekend that we went on that trip. He said, that was when it started. And now through the years, we've had a lot of guys that have been baptized in their Ironman Outdoors t-shirts. And it's not, I mean, to God the glory, not Ironman. That's not what it's about. But I think it's cool that these guys look back on that weekend and they say that it all started there. Now, we do some follow-up. Obviously, we have text groups where we're texting during the retreat, and I'm actually texting these guys while they're in the tree stand. Hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think your marriage is? Think about it. We'll talk about it tonight. And he's got 3 hours or 4 hours to mull over that question while he's in the tree stand. So we have these text groups that sometimes live on for 4 and 5 years past the retreat.
Oh, wow.
This year, we've written a follow-up a Bible study, a 7-day follow-up Bible study that guys are going to get automatically. The day they get home from the retreat, well, actually, it'll be that Monday. The following Monday will be day 1. And they'll, to their email inbox, they'll get a Bible study devotion of 4 or 5 minutes delivered to their inbox every day for 7 days. Sometimes we have followed up with guys who've made decisions of faith. We've helped locate them a church. We've directed them to churches. We had one guy from Long Island who came to South Carolina on a hog hunt, and he made a decision for Christ. And he kind of jokingly told us the next week that on his way home, after he was driving back up north, he stayed in the hotel on the way home, and he stole a Gideon Bible out of the hotel room. And he asked us, did he think that, is that okay? I said, sure, that's okay. They want that Bible to be used. And I said, and oh, by the way, we're going to send you a nice camouflage Bible. So we do some follow-up in ways like that too. But ministry is about relationships. And we're building relationships with men. A lot of these guys come on multiple retreats. They'll go back home and they'll tell their wife and kids about it, and they'll tell their buddies at church or wherever they're at. And you'll see them back next year with 2 or 3 guys with them. And so we continue the relationship that way as well.
Well, you've mentioned South Carolina today, and I think you mentioned Alabama, or maybe that was our conversation before, but you all have a really big footprint. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how far and wide you go so people that are interested from hearing today, if they want to try to connect with you, can understand how broad sweeping your hunts and fishing opportunities are.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have about 100 volunteers that we call field staffers and pro staffers. And those guys are in 14 different states, all the way from Texas, all the way up to Pennsylvania and in the South. Obviously, we do retreats. We have about 30 deer hunting retreats coming up here in just the next few months. It all gets started, in Cambridge, Ohio here in just a couple of weeks. We've got our first retreat there. We do retreats in Alabama, Kentucky, Missouri, Wisconsin, Illinois, Kansas, Ohio, I mentioned, and then North Carolina, South Carolina. We've Texas. We don't have a deer hunt in Texas this year, but we do hog hunting and stuff in Texas. Louisiana, we've done stuff in Louisiana as well. Wherever, guys, we do saltwater fishing in Florida. We have a good group down in Jacksonville, Florida. They're big into saltwater fishing, and so they help us put on several redfish and speckled trout type retreats every year. Whatever men want to do, we want to do it with them so that we can connect them to Christ in the outdoors. And that's our mission statement. If you want to learn more about it, go to www.ironmanoutdoors.org or check us out on Facebook and Instagram, social media. Social media really is how we help spread the word about our retreats. We'll post a trail camera picture on there and we'll say, hey, we got, 3 open spots on this retreat coming up in such and such state. And a lot of guys, sometimes on one retreat, we'll have guys from 5 or 6 different states on one retreat. We got a father and son retreat coming up. We do some father and son hunts. This is a hog hunting retreat in Brantley, Alabama, and it's coming up in October. And we were just looking at the spreadsheet last night. We were on a Zoom call, and we've got guys from 6 different states coming to that father and son retreat. So that's really cool as well.
And you mentioned earlier that you had some gentlemen that came on the trip that didn't necessarily have the most hunting experience. I assume that y'all are open to people of all types, and this isn't just for the truly experienced hunter and fisherman.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're not, if you didn't grow up hunting, that's okay. Come with us. We're going to put you in a nice, comfortable stand. We'll help you get your gun sighted in. Like I've had more than one person show up who just came from Walmart and bought their gun. And I said, well, do you need to shoot it? Oh, no, it's bore sighted. I should be good. I'm like, no. Let's go put that thing on the range and let's put it on the paper. And they were way off. And so I'm glad that we got them sighted in, but we'll help you through all of that. If you don't know how to skin a deer or don't know how to skin a hog, we'll take care of that and help you. We're not outfitters. I think we're better than outfitters because the quality of the pro staffers that we have, I mean, they're cream of the crop men who are just like you and I, who love the Lord and they love the outdoors. They want to use their Polaris Ranger, or they want to use their passion for the outdoors. They want to use it for the kingdom. And so when you come on our retreats, man, if you forget your binoculars, one of our guys is probably going to give you his pair of binoculars. We've had guys that showed up and something was wrong with their bow. And one of our volunteers, here, let's go out here. You shoot my bow and let's get it set up for your height. And, let's go hit. And in 20, 30 minutes, we got that guy shooting good. And he's now hunting with the other guy's bow. Just really cool things. And I don't think you'd see that if you went, with an outfitter, or at least some outfitters.
Well, Patrick, it sounds like you're making a true impact for the kingdom. And I just congratulate you and thank you for all you're doing. As an avid hunter and fisherman, I admire the path you're going and how you go about it. But as a follower of Christ, I more than anything admire how you're helping lead men back into being the right type of individuals, the right type of husbands, the right type of fathers. And so thank you so much. This has been a great opportunity to hear your story and to hear a little bit about Ironman Outdoors. And if you could, I'd just like to say thank you to our audience for their time today. Thank you for listening in. We encourage you to turn back here to the Redeemed. We'll have another interesting podcast coming up next month. Please follow us on social media and always look out for us on the third Thursday. Thank you very much.